The Joe Rogan Experience.
Winston Churchill, do you know about Operation Unthinkable?
No.
Dude, we were just doing an episode on
This
Winston
is wild.
Churchill, and then we start discovering this shit, and we said, dude, this is a Patreon episode. We can't. Operation Unthinkable, Winston Churchill, the man who was protecting England, killing the Nazis. When the war was over, when Nazis were out, he said, I don't like the way the United States and Russia are getting so close together.
Oh, yeah, I do
and
know
so
about
he
this.
said,
Yeah.
so he said, you know what? Someone's going to have to knock the Russians out. And the British were like, we don't have the manpower right now. So he literally went to Parliament and said to them, here's an idea. We're calling it Operation Unthinkable. We need to knock out Russia before they become the next superpower, and then they're going to attack us. You know how we have 40,000 German prisoners of war right now, Nazi prisoners of war? Let's give them guns and we'll march them into Russia and we'll be side to side with them. And that was his literal, he wanted to team up with the Nazis to try to take over Russia. And that's, as we call it on the show, a Truth Bader Ginsburg. That's a fact, baby. And that, when we uncovered that, we were like, so none of this history, as we're taught in school, same thing we uncovered that they knew, allegedly, Churchill and FDR knew about the Holocaust, but it was real. It was yielding scientific data, so they let it kind of go. They made believe they didn't know, but they let it go. And then once they just started killing people with no science, they said, okay, let's liberate them now.
What scientific data was it yielding?
Supposedly because Nazi scientists were doing different types of experiments with Holocaust victims, and they were getting some type of scientific data because they didn't care if they lived or died, so they would inject them with some type of chemical or some type of, machinery. Yeah, it's this book I read called The Nazi Symbiosis. They talked all about it. It was wild to read that on a plane with a big swastika on the front cover.
That
was wild.
Yeah.
Thing. What you
want to do if you have
to
to read that book is put a yarmulke on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't you remember when you were a kid, how do you make your own book cover, like fucking paper bag?
Yeah. I just walked onto JetBlue with a swastika. That wasn't a good idea.
Or just put a female wig on and just say you're trans and they leave you alone.
That's it. And just say, hey, I'm cake shaming.
The problem is you look like Aryan.
I know.
That's the problem.
That's the issue.
You can't
That's
be
the
reading
problem.
that.
I get a little triggered around him because the Nazis did occupy my home country of Greece, and I get a little triggered by his German presence. He's a German kid from Ridgewood, and sometimes he root in history. When he was growing up, he said just for fun, he likes to. He always kind of rooted. Sometimes you root for that.
Let me clarify. I wasn't rooting for the Nazis. What I was saying was,
But you just,
What I was saying was this. Just hear me out.
Yeah.
One, I think it's an undeniable fact they did have the best uniforms.
They were
designed by
cute.
Hugo Boss. They were
Yeah.
cute marching in. That's an undeniable fact. Number two, just hear me out. If you listen to a Hitler speech, AI generated, what if they translated into English, okay, and you just churned out Deutschland for America, and you're just listening, you don't know that's Hitler, what Hitler's saying is it just pumps you up. It's horrible what he did.
I've seen it. Yeah,
right?
There's English translations of it. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Like when he says, there's a speech where he says, we're up against Germany, we are up against England right now. We are two superpowers. And the only way to prevail is one must be destroyed. And it will not be Germany. And the crowd goes nuts. You start to say, like, holy fucking shit.
This guy was a headliner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
he
no,
was.
You would have had that guy in the mothership on a Friday, Saturday, no problem.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird when you see it that way, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's also weird when you see the horrors of the war escalate till eventually it becomes the Holocaust.
Right.
It's also weird the ubiquitous drug use.
Oh.
Like that. Have you read that
yeah.
book? Do we have it still here, Jamie? Or is it in the other room now?
I think everyone during
Norman-
war is on something.
What, with the crystal meth, the Panzer chocolate?
Yeah.
Panzer
Well,
chocolat.
yeah, it was Blitzed.
Yes.
It's a fucking crazy book. And I had the author in here, and he's explaining. There it is. Here it is. Norman Ohler.
Mm-hmm.
This book is fucking nuts. This
Nice.
is nuts. They had the...
Can I take that for the plane?
No, this is my book.
Oh, sorry.
Fuck off. Go buy one.
Amazon.
Amazon.com.
Yeah.
Don't you have an audiobook reader thing?
No, I like to read it, the words. I can't really listen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a weird brain like that.
Well, you can get audio book or regular books on your phone. Don't you know that?
I try to. I feel like I'm addicted to the phone. I like to read the paperback.
Yeah, probably better.
Yeah. So, but to each their own.
But if it wasn't for drugs, they would have never done
No.
90% of the things they did,
No.
and then they just descended into madness.
Yeah, and a lot of Germans, if those 5 years from 1945 to 1950, that suicide rate of German soldiers coming home was through the roof, Poppy, because they were coming off meth. They were getting ostracized by their own people in the rest of Europe, and they were saying, what did I do? Some of them actually were, obviously, a lot of them were just horrific people that were sadistic, but a lot of these guys, also, it's not like they had a choice. They had to fight in the Nazi army or they would be killed.
Yeah. Right.
And then they were all drugged out, so then the suicide rate tripled.
Yeah, but let's not act like it was just the drugs. I mean, the whole Jewish thing was nothing new. I mean, I have a theory about that. It's like the Jews just always figured out a way to flourish in wherever they were, and they're just good at economics. And I think when a country goes through economic hardships and everyone's suffering, they just look at the Jews and they go, well, they just get jealous and they go, what are they doing? And then it's an easy scapegoat. Jews just crush it in money, dude. They're just good with business.
They're better at money.
They're just good.
I know,
They're
man.
just good with it.
Yeah.
Did you have a Jewish guy that told you not to buy that house?
Huh? Yes. And I overrode the Jew for ChatGPT, and that was
the problem. That's the problem.
Unless my ChatGPT could be Jewish too. I don't know. I've never asked it that.
It's probably Chinese.
They're just smart. Jews, they emphasize education, and they're really good, and they've been able to flourish under adversity.
I think there's also they stick to their own, and that drives people wild.
Right.
You know, that they don't like that.
Yeah.
Right.
But Greeks do. Greeks do the same thing.
Sure, a lot of groups, a lot of ethnic groups.
Yeah, Greeks are pretty. You guys, when I get into really know Yannis well, you guys have a lot of inbred qualities.
I mean, look at my eyes.
Yeah. He was too. It was not. My generations were a little bit further apart than his. He might have been third, fourth cousin. I'm eighth, ninth.
Yeah.
It's not going to hit.
You go back to the Toba volcano eruption. The whole entire population of Earth was down to a few thousand people. Wow. So we all come from those people. So we're all a little inbred.
A little bit, right? It's got to be.
I actually have a lot of. I got some Turkish genetics in me. I did 23andMe, so they have my DNA, so they can pin anything on me.
They got you.
They got me.
Well, that was raped into your great-great-great-grandmother.
Probably.
Unfortunately.
The
Ottoman Empire.
This is a true story. My grandfather is from the island that used to be called Imbros, which is now called something with a squiggly line over it because it's a Turkish word. The Turks took that island back, and my grandfather was sent away to Alexandria by my great-grandparents because the local Ottoman viceroy, or whatever they called it, they have a word for it, but he was essentially a viceroy, was like raping boys. Damn. So they sent him away, and he never saw his family again. He went to live in Alexandria, and then he came to America, and yes, he opened a diner.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, after he worked his way.
What about that story you told me? I think it was your mom or your mom's sister, or you're in the town.
Oh, dude.
Tell him that story with the tank.
Yeah, that's Lex Friedman loved that episode. He told me about that.
Dude.
We did a Battle of Crete episode, and it's true because my mother was a little child during the occupation of Crete. The Battle of Crete is a wild.
His mother grew up in Nazi-occupied Greece.
Yeah.
Wild.
And so what the Nazis would do is they would take a girl from the village, because they were marching troops through all over the place, through the mountains. The guerrillas, the Greek guerrilla fighters, which was the local populations, they were also with the British and New Zealand and Australian troops, but they would pluck them off because they knew the terrain, and they would pluck them off, guerrilla warfare. So the Nazis were so brutal but smart, in a devious way. They would take a girl from the village and put her up high in the truck to march through that area of that village, so the guerrillas wouldn't shoot. So they were going to take my aunt, my mom's mother. So they sent my aunt to go hide in the mountains, and the Nazis came to my mother's parents' house, to her house, and my mother was like 7 at the time, and they came with their flashlights. They pulled the sheets back of my mother, and supposedly like she was too small. So they kind of knew they wanted a girl who was like teenager, kind of tall. So it wasn't too brutal because it was like a little kid, but it was like enough that it would ward off the guerrillas from firing at
but
them.
what is it, guerrillas? Because if they missed, or if Nazi got shot, then they would kill the girl.
Yeah,
on
they're
the
basically
truck.
going. It's basically a hostage, going like we're taking a village girl, putting her up, and making her visible because they don't know the terrain. Crete is very mountainous, and so then they would do that, and they were going to take my aunt. So a family friend who worked for the Nazis, because he spoke German, warned my family about it. And then that's when they sent my aunt to go hide in the mountains.
Oh my God!
Wild stuff. Yeah.
Right.
And then my mother said that there was a Nazi soldier who would come to their house every single day. They had to let him in, and he would go to a room every day, and they didn't know what he did in there. It's a family mystery. Nobody knows what he did. They let him in. He'd go to a room by himself, and nobody knows what he did. Maybe he took a nap. Maybe he was a spy. Maybe he was a double agent.
You just had to let him in.
Had to let him in.
Crazy, dude.
Occupation for
Yeah.
3 years.